We got reports of tools going missing. You mind if I check your bag real quick?
I don't have a bag, officer. Just picking up this one drill bit.
ID. Now. Dispatch, send back up to Harper's Hardware. Possible suspect not
Nothing wrong.
cooperating.
I've served in a...
I still smell the sawdust and motor oil. That day the cop decided I didn't belong in my own town and put his knee so hard on my neck I thought I'd never see my daughter graduate. Y'all ever walk into a store just to buy one thing and feel eyes on you like you're already guilty? Drop your city in the comments if you felt that weight. I want to know I'm not alone. If stories like this hit home, hit that subscribe so we keep shining light on what really happens when the uniform turns on one of its own. Let me take you back a bit, because this didn't just drop out of nowhere. My name's Jamal Carter, and I'm pushing mid-40s now, living in this quiet little spot in Georgia called Willow Creek. It's one of those small towns where everybody knows your truck by the sound of the engine, but not everybody wants to know you if your skin's a shade darker than theirs. I wasn't always here, though. I spent 12 years in the Marines Recon unit, scouting ahead in places where the sand burned your feet and the nights were full of shadows that could kill you. I came home with a chest full of ribbons, a bad shoulder from a bad jump, and a promise to myself that I'd build a simple life. No more dodging bullets overseas, just me, my wife Lena, and our daughter Aaliyah. Life was good in those couple years before everything went sideways. We'd grill out back on Sundays, the smoke from the ribs curling up like lazy prayers to the sky. Lena would laugh at my bad jokes, her voice like warm honey, while Aaliyah rolled her eyes and snuck extra cornbread. She was 16 then, all legs and dreams, talking about college and maybe becoming a teacher. I'd fix up our old house, a fixer-upper we bought cheap after I got out. The wood creaked under my boots as I'd hammer nails into the porch, sweat dripping down my back in that Georgia heat that sticks to you like regret. Construction work kept me steady. I'd swing a hammer all day, building decks and fences for folks who smiled to my face but whispered behind it. It was honest work, paid the bills, let me be home for dinner most nights. But even then, there were these little cracks in the picture, like hairline fractures in a windshield that you ignore until the whole thing shatters. I'd catch stares at the gas station, folks clutching their purses a little tighter when I walked by. At work, the jokes came easy, guys saying stuff like, "Jamal, you sure you're not scouting for the competition?" with that fake laugh that hides the knife. I'd brush it off, tell myself it was just ignorance, not hate. After all, I'd served this country, bled for it. That had to count for something, right? I'd sit Aaliyah down sometimes after she'd come home from school upset about some kid's comment, and we'd talk. "Keep your hands visible. If you ever get pulled over," I'd say, my voice steady but my gut twisting. "Say yes, sir, no, sir. Don't give 'em a reason." She'd nod, her big eyes serious, and I'd hug her tight, feeling like I was passing down a curse instead of wisdom. But deep down, I believed it. If we just stayed respectful, played by the rules, the world would see us for who we were. Good folks, trying to live right. Those days felt safe, wrapped in routine like a warm blanket. Mornings started with coffee, black as midnight, Lena stirring eggs in the kitchen while the radio played old soul tunes. I'd kiss her goodbye, tasting the salt from her skin, and head out to the job site. The air smelled of pine and fresh-cut grass, the kind of scent that makes you think life's got more good than bad. Evenings were for family, helping Aaliyah with homework, her pencil scratching across paper as she figured out algebra that made my head spin. We'd watch the sun dip low, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. And I'd think, this is what I fought for, a piece of peace. But peace is fragile, ain't it? Like glass under pressure. I started noticing the unease creeping in slower, like fog rolling off the river. It wasn't big things at first, just those side glances that linger too long. One time at the diner, the waitress served everyone else first, her smile tight when she finally got to me. I paid and left, stomach sour, telling myself it was a busy day. At the hardware store, Harper's, old place run by Mr. Harper, who's been there forever, I'd grab supplies and sometimes feel that prickle on my neck like someone was watching. Turned out it was this deputy, Travis Boone, off duty but always in uniform pants, like he couldn't let go of the power. He'd nod, but his eyes were cold, like chips of ice. I'd seen him around town, pulling over cars with tinted windows more often than not. Folks whispered about him, said he had a temper, a way of making you feel small. I pushed it down, focused on the good, like that one summer evening, grilling burgers with the neighbors, mostly white folks, but a couple families like ours. Laughter echoed over the fence, kids running with sparklers as the fireflies lit up the yard. Lena's hand in mine felt like home, solid and real. Aaliyah danced to the music from the speaker, her hair bouncing, carefree in a way I envied. Those moments were gold, pure and shining, making the shadows seem smaller. Work kept me grounded, too. I'd show up at dawn, tools clinking in my belt, building things that lasted. My boss, Old Man Riley, wasn't bad. Gave me fair hours, even if the pay was tight. We'd joke about the heat, how it made the asphalt soften under our boots. But even there, the unease slipped in. A coworker once forgot to invite me to the company picnic, then acted surprised when I mentioned it. "Oh, thought you were busy," he'd say, avoiding my eyes. I'd swallow the bitterness, remind myself of the bigger picture, my service. Those years in Recon, leading teams through hell, spotting dangers before they hit. It taught me patience, control. I used it every day, biting back words that could start fires. Home was my anchor. Lena with her quiet strength. She worked at the local clinic, helping folks who couldn't afford much. She'd come home tired but smiling, telling stories of patients who beat the odds. We'd sit on the couch after Aaliyah went to bed, her head on my shoulder, talking about dreams. "One day we'll take that trip to the coast," she'd say, her fingers tracing circles on my arm. I'd nod, feeling the weight of providing, the pride in it. Aaliyah was my light, smart as a whip, always reading books thicker than my fist. I'd help her with projects, like building a model for science class, our hands sticky with glue. Those nights, the world felt right, but the cracks widened. Teaching Aaliyah about the world hurt like a slow burn. "Why do I have to be extra careful, Dad?" she'd ask, her voice small. I'd explain as best I could without scaring her too much. "Some folks see color first, baby girl, but you keep your head high." Inside, it tore at me, like a thorn in my heart, digging deeper each time. I remembered my own dad saying the same to me back in the day. "Cycles, man. They keep turning unless you break them." Still, I held on to hope. Believed in the system, in people. After all, I'd worn the uniform, saluted the flag. That rainy Thursday started like any other. Woke up to thunder rumbling like distant artillery, rain pattering on the roof. Lena kissed me goodbye, her lips soft against the stubble on my cheek. "Be safe out there," she said, like always. Aaliyah was at school, prepping for some test. I headed to the job site, but halfway through the day, I realized I needed a new drill bit. Old one snapped clean off while boring into oak. Harper's was close, so I swung by during lunch break. The bell jingled as I pushed open the door, the scent of metal and wood hitting me like an old friend. Rain dripped from my jacket, pooling on the worn linoleum. I nodded to Mr. Harper behind the counter. He knew me, gave a quick wave, headed straight to the tools aisle, scanning for the right size bit. That's when I felt it, that prickle again. Glanced up, and there he was, Travis Boone, leaning against a display of power saws, his arms crossed, eyes locked on me. Heart kicked up a notch, old training whispering in my ear. Assess the threat, stay calm. I grabbed the bit, turned toward the register, but his gaze followed, heavy as lead. My steps echoed softly on the concrete floor, each one measured, like patrolling a perimeter where danger hid in plain sight. Boone pushed off the display, his boots scuffing against the grit, closing the gap with that slow, deliberate stride cops use to make you feel cornered. "You find what you're looking for, buddy?" he drawled, his voice low and edged with something sharper than curiosity. I kept my tone even, nodding as I held up the drill bit. "Yeah, just this. Heading out now." Simple words, no attitude, but his eyes narrowed, like I'd handed him a challenge instead of an answer. He tilted his head, scanning me from head to toe, that uniform shirt stretched tight over his gut. "Reports of tools walking out the door lately. Mind if I take a look in your bag?" My stomach nodded. No bag on me, just the bit in my fist. Keys jingling in my pocket, phone warm against my thigh. "Ain't got a bag, officer. Just picking up this one thing." I opened my palm to show him, keeping everything visible. No sudden moves, but his face hardened, lips curling into that smirk that says he already knows the script and I'm the villain in it. Memories flickered like muzzle flashes. Fallujah nights, crouched in the dust, heart pounding as I scanned rooftops for snipers. Breathe in, hold, out slow. I did the same here, air thick with the tang of varnish and rust, my hands loose at my sides. Overseas, I was the shield, spotting threats before they struck, pulling brothers out of harm's way. Now in this fluorescent-lit maze of shelves, I was the one pinned down, my presence alone enough to trigger alarms in his head. The irony burned like shrapnel, defending freedoms abroad, only to have them stripped away at home over a damn drill bit. Guilt washed over me then, cold and relentless, like the rain drumming on the roof outside. Aaliyah's face popped into my mind, her sitting at that wobbly desk in her room, book stacked high, waiting for me to tighten the screws so she could study without it shaking. "Dad, you promised," she'd said that morning, her smile bright as sunrise. What if I didn't make it back? What story would Lena tell her? That her old man got taken down for looking suspicious in a store he'd shopped in for years? The thought twisted like a blade. I was supposed to protect them, show her strength, not this vulnerability that came with the color of my skin. Boone stepped closer, his shadow falling over me, breath smelling faintly of stale coffee. "ID, let's see it." Not a request. An order barked, like I was already cuffed. I nodded slow, "Sure thing," and reached for my back pocket with exaggerated care, fingers pinching the wallet's edge. No rushing. I'd seen enough videos where a quick move turned into, he reached for something. He watched every inch, hand hovering near his belt, tension coiling in the air between us. I flipped open the leather, pulled out my license, and extended it with my arm straight, palm up. He snatched it, eyes flicking over the details, mouthing my name like it tasted sour. But that wasn't enough. He keyed his radio, static crackling as he muttered, "Got a possible here at Harper's. Send backup." My pulse spiked. Backup? For what? Holding hardware? Around us, the store stirred. An older white lady with a basket of light bulbs paused at the end of the aisle, her brows furrowing as she glanced our way. A young Latino guy in a work vest, stocking shelves nearby, slowed his movements, peeking over boxes. Some folks hurried past, heads down, but others lingered, whispers starting like distant thunder. I kept my cool, but inside, questions churned. "Officer, can I ask what's going on? I haven't done anything." My voice stayed level, but it carried that undercurrent of weariness, the kind built from too many random stops. Boone's grip tightened on my ID, his knuckles whitening. "You questioning me?" He leaned in, close enough I could see the veins in his neck pulsing. Then his hand shot out, clamping my arm like a vice, right on that old shoulder scar from the jump that went wrong. Pain lanced through me, hot and familiar, making my breath hitch. I didn't yank away, didn't even flinch much, but my voice cracked as I said, "I've served this country, man, fought for it. You don't have to do this." He twisted harder for a second, like testing my resolve, before letting go with a shove that sent me back a step. The drill bit nearly slipped from my other hand. Served, huh? Don't mean squat if you're light-fingered. The lady with the bulbs gasped softly, her hand going to her mouth. The young worker pulled out his phone, thumb hovering, like he was deciding whether to hit record. Boone shot them a glare, but the damage was spreading. Eyes on us from every direction now, the store's hum fading into uneasy silence. Radio static buzzed again, and soon enough, tires squealed outside, doors slamming. 2 more officers pushed through the entrance, rain slicking their jackets, hands on holsters as they zeroed in on us. Boone waved them over, his voice rising. Suspects resisting. Check him. Resisting? I hadn't moved an inch since handing over the ID. The new guys fanned out, one blocking the path to the register, the other circling behind shelves, cutting off escape routes. Shoppers murmured louder now, a few backing away, but the older lady edged closer, her basket forgotten on the floor. The young worker lifted his phone outright, lens pointed our way, red light blinking. Anger simmered deep in my chest, mixing with a shame that tasted like bile. Why did I feel this compulsion to justify myself, to flash my service like a badge of worth? My DD-214 sat folded in that wallet, proof of missions cleared, lives saved, yet here it was, worthless paper against his assumptions. I'd proven myself in deserts and jungles, but in Willow Creek, I was still just another face that didn't fit. The pain in my shoulder throbbed in time with my heartbeat, a reminder of battles past, now echoed in this petty standoff. Boone handed my ID to one of the backups, who ran it through a scanner on his belt. Clean, the guy grunted, but Boone waved it off. Pat him down anyway. The order hung there heavy as the rain outside picked up, hammering the windows like accusations. I stood frozen, mind racing, comply and lose dignity, resist and risk everything. The young worker's phone stayed steady, capturing it all, while the older lady's eyes met mine, wide with something like sympathy or shock. Tension wrapped around us tighter, the air electric, waiting for the spark. My thoughts spiraled back to Lena's worried face that morning, her hand lingering on my arm as if sensing trouble. "Come home safe," she'd whispered. Now, with these 3 closing in, that promise felt fragile as glass. The backup officer stepped forward, his expression blank, ready to follow through. I braced myself, every muscle taut, the drill bit still clenched in my fist like a useless talisman. Shame burned hotter. Why prove anything to them? But survival whispered, just get through this, for Aaliyah's sake. Boone's radio crackled with dispatch chatter, but he ignored it, eyes locked on me. "Hands up," he snapped. I raised them slow, palms out, the bit glinting under the lights. The pat-down started rough, hands slapping pockets, yanking at my jacket. Nothing there but keys and phone. But he lingered, pressing hard like he expected contraband to materialize. The older lady muttered, "This ain't right," her voice shaking but firm. More phones appeared, lights winking on from the growing crowd. The young worker narrated quietly into his device. "He's just buying a tool, man. No reason for this." Inside, the anger shifted, bubbling into quiet defiance. I'd faced worse, ambushes where death was a breath away. This was different, insidious, chipping at my soul. Why did my sacrifices echo hollow here? The DD-214 mocked me from the wallet now back in Boone's hand. One backup grumbled, "Nothing on him," but Boone shook his head. "Check again." The repetition grated, fueling the fire in my veins. Guilt resurfaced, sharper. Aaliyah's desk waited unfinished, her trust in me unshakable. What lesson was I modeling now? That respect buys nothing? The shoulder ache pulsed, a metronome of resentment. Shoppers' whispers grew to voices. "Let him go!" someone called from afar. The tension peaked, Boone's face reddening as control slipped. He radioed again, voice clipped. Situation escalating. Need more units. My breath came shallow, the store spinning slightly from the adrenaline dump. The young workers filming emboldened others. Flashes popped as photos snapped. The older lady fished out her own phone, dialing with trembling fingers. 911? The irony stung. Boone noticed, barking, "Mind your business!" But the net was cast, eyes everywhere. Shame twisted into resolve. I wouldn't break here. Not for him. The backups shifted uncomfortably, one murmuring, "Maybe wrap this up." But Boone doubled down, grabbing my collar suddenly, yanking me forward. "You think you're special?" Pain flared anew, but I met his gaze, voice steady despite the crack. "No, just a man trying to go home." The crowd swelled, murmurs turning to outcries. The young worker shouted, "Yo, that's assault!" Phones multiplied, a digital shield forming. Boone's grip loosened slightly, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. But he held on, radio alive with incoming chatter. My mind clung to Aaliyah's laughter, Lena's touch, anchors in the storm. The exit felt miles away, blocked by badges and bias. Anger and shame warred inside, a storm brewing. Why beg for humanity? My service papers, useless as they seemed, burned in memory. Proof I belonged. The pat-down resumed, invasive, humiliating. Whispers evolved to demands. "Stop harassing him." The older lady's call connected, her words urgent. "Officer, out of line at Harper's." Tension coiled to breaking. Boone's lies unraveling under scrutiny. He lied again on radio. Aggressive behavior. But videos rolled, truth capturing every frame. My shoulders screamed, but I stood tall. The drill bit a symbol of the ordinary turned ordeal. Guilt for my family fueled quiet fury. This wasn't just about me. The backups hesitated, sensing the shift. Boone's face contorted, control fraying as the store transformed into a stage of judgment. Phones beeped with shares, the moment amplifying. Inside, reflection deepened. Proving worth was exhausting, a loop I hated. DD 214 or not, I was more than this. The young worker approached cautiously, phone high. "We got your back, bro." Solidarity sparked hope amid the chaos. Boone shoved me back against a rack, tools rattling. "Stay put." Pain shot through, but defiance rose. The crowd's energy pulsed, a turning tide. Radio blared. "Units en route." My heart hammered, the brink near. Shame faded to clarity. I didn't need to prove anything. Survival meant enduring for those waiting home. The older lady's voice rose. "I'm reporting this." More voices joined, a chorus against injustice. The backups exchanged glances, unease clear. Boone barked orders, but authority waned. Videos spread, invisible threads pulling the scene wider. My fist tightened around the bit, a lifeline. Inner turmoil peaked, anger at the system, shame for complying, but resolve to outlast. Aaliyah's future flashed, her strength born from mine. The store thrummed with unrest, the spark igniting. Boone's hand hovered near his taser, eyes wild. "Don't move!" But movement stirred everywhere else, feet shuffling, voices rising. The young worker's live stream hummed, comments flooding in real time. Guilt twisted one last time. What if this escalated? Lena's worry, Aaliyah's innocence. I breathed deep, channeling Recon calm. The backups blocked tighter, but cracks showed. Tension hung knife edge, ready to slice. Boone leaned in, breath hot. "You asked for this." But I hadn't. The crowd pushed back verbally, a wall of witnesses. Reflection hit hard. My useless papers symbolized broken promises. Anger surged, tempered by wisdom. Fight smart, not hard. The radio squawked, "ETA 1 minute." Sirens wailed distant, closing in. My shoulder throbbed, a badge of endurance. The drill bit dug into my palm, grounding me. Shame dissolved into quiet power. I was no threat, but their fear made me one. The older lady stepped forward boldly. "Enough!" Her phone thrust out, recording. Boone whirled on her, but too late. The scene boiled over. Voices overlapped. Demands for release. The young worker's feed buzzed with views. Inner shame flipped to pride. I'd held ground. DD 214 or not, my worth was inherent. The backup shifted, one whispering to Boone. Tension crested, the air crackling. Boone's face flushed, decision point near. My eyes stayed on him, unyielding, the weight of eyes bearing down. Sirens grew louder, slicing through the downpour like warnings from a storm I couldn't outrun. Boone's flush deepened to a beet-red fury, his jaw clenching as the crowd's stares bored into him, a silent jury turning the tables. My gaze held firm, a quiet anchor in the whirlwind, drawing on every ounce of discipline forged in distant battlefields where folding meant failure. He lunged then, not with words, but with force, his palms slamming into my chest, propelling me backward into a towering stack of paint cans. Metal clattered in a deafening cascade, lids popping free as gallons spilled across the floor in sticky rivers of white and blue, the sharp chemical stink filling my nostrils like acrid smoke from a grenade. I stumbled, back hitting the shelf edge, but before I could regain footing, Boone was on me. His knee drove down hard onto my neck, pinning me to the cold, slick ground amid the mess. Air vanished in an instant, my throat constricting under the weight, world tunneling to a pinpoint of fluorescent glare and distant shouts. I can't breathe, I rasped, the words scraping out like echoes from headlines I'd scrolled past too many times, names of brothers and sisters who'd whispered the same plea. Panic clawed at the edges of my vision, black spots dancing, but I didn't thrash. Instinct screamed to fight, yet experience held me still, knowing any twitch could be the excuse he craved. The older white lady, Miss Evelyn, I'd learn later, with her neat perm and sensible shoes, let out a piercing cry that cut through the chaos. "Stop it right now. He's done nothing wrong. You're hurting him." Her voice cracked with outrage, hands fumbling for her phone as she hit the live button, screen glowing like a beacon. The young Latino worker, his name tag reading Carlos, surged forward a step, positioning himself to partially shield the view, his own device raised high. "Back off, man. We're seeing all this. It's going viral." Their actions ignited the room, more shoppers pulling out cells, a forest of lenses capturing every brutal second. Boone pressed harder for a heartbeat, his breath ragged above me, but the swelling noise forced a flicker of doubt across his features. I lay there, neck burning under the pressure, mind racing through a haze of survival drills. Count breaths, stay present, wait for the opening. But this wasn't a foreign enemy. It was home soil, where the uniform I'd once respected now crushed the life from my lungs. Rage bubbled up, hot and unbidden. Not the explosive kind, but a deep, simmering boil that made my fingers curl into the spilled paint, nails scraping concrete. With oxygen fading, I forced out the words I'd held back, voice a hoarse murmur. Marine Recon, 12 years, I fought for this flag. Not a boast, just a desperate bid to humanize myself, to crack through his wall of prejudice. Boone's laugh barked out, bitter and hollow, echoing off the shelves. "Everybody's somebody these days, huh? Don't make you innocent." The mockery stung worse than the knee, twisting the knife of betrayal. I'd risked everything for a nation that let men like him wear the badge. But I didn't budge. Discipline chaining the fury, saving me from a fatal escalation. Inside, though, it roared, "How many tours, how many scars to earn basic decency?" Tears pricked my eyes, not from pain alone, but from the flood of images crashing in. Aaliyah's high school graduation photo on my phone's lock screen, her cap tossed high, grin wide with promise. It blurred in my mind's eye, mixing with the wet streaks of rain tracked in on boots, pooling around me on the floor. If I blacked out here, if this knee became my end, What tale would spin for her? Your dad was trouble, they'd say, twisting facts to fit their narrative, leaving her to carry the doubt like a shadow. The thought ripped at my core, a raw ache sharper than any wound from war, fueling a silent vow. Hold on for her future, for the light she brought to my days. The pressure eased a fraction as Miss Evelyn's live stream buzzed with notifications, her commentary urgent. Look at this. Police brutality in broad daylight. Share this, everyone. Carlos echoed her, his feed syncing to socials, hashtags flying. Hash justice, now hash Willow Creek shame. The backups hovered, faces uneasy, one muttering into his collar mic. Crowd's getting rowdy. Advise? Boone snarled back, but his knee shifted, the grind lessening as reality sank in. He wasn't in control anymore. The digital eyes outnumbered his authority. Then came the turning point. Heavy footsteps pounding from the back of the store. Mr. Harper burst through the swinging doors from his office, his 60s frame wiry and flushed, glasses slipping down his nose from the sprint. He'd known me since I was knee-high, buying nails for my dad's projects, later grabbing supplies for my own home fixes. What in God's name is going on here? He bellowed, voice booming like a drill sergeant. Spotting me pinned, his eyes widened in recognition. Jamal, get off him, now! He's been a customer here longer than some of you been on the force. Let him up, Boone, or so help me. I'll have your badge myself. Chaos erupted fully then, phones multiplying like fireflies in the dimming light of the storm outside. Boone hesitated, knee lifting slow as if reluctant to surrender the power, his glare burning holes. The backup stepped back a pace, hands dropping from holsters, whispers passing between them like guilty secrets. Miss Evelyn's stream hit hundreds of views in minutes, comments scrolling. This is insane. Call the mayor. Carlos blocked a clearer angle for one officer, his stance defiant, feed capturing Boone's retreat. Air rushed back into my lungs as the weight vanished, a gasp escaping that sounded too much like surrender. I pushed up slowly, neck throbbing with a deep bruise that pulsed like a fresh tattoo, dignity frayed but intact. Paint clung to my clothes, a messy badge of the ordeal, the chemical burn irritating my skin. Boone loomed close, voice a low growl. This ain't over, you hear? You think a few videos change anything? His words hung threatening, but the waver in them betrayed the shift, the hunter cornered by his prey's unexpected allies. I stood there, legs shaky but spine straight, the crowd's murmurs a protective hum around me. Rage still simmered, but now laced with a fragile spark of vindication. These strangers had seen, had spoken, turning isolation into solidarity. Mr. Harper clapped a hand on my shoulder, gentle despite the firmness, his eyes fierce. You all right, son? I've got cameras rolling, every angle. Phones kept recording, the scene immortalized, Boone's control dissolving like the paint underfoot. The backups radioed for guidance, static replies crackling with urgency. Miss Evelyn approached, her face etched with concern, phone still live. Honey, that was awful. I've got it all here. We'll make sure this gets out. Carlos nodded, his feed exploding with shares, the digital wave building momentum. Boone paced a tight circle, fists clenched, the sirens now right outside, more lights flashing through the windows. My breath steadied, but the emotional torrent raged on, tears drying on my cheeks, Aaliyah's image a talisman against despair. The bruise on my neck ached with every swallow, a reminder of fragility, but also of resilience. Mr. Harper waved over a clerk, barking orders to secure the footage, his loyalty a rare light in the gloom. Chaos swirled, voices overlapping in a cacophony of support and accusation. Boone's warning echoed in my ears, a dark promise amid the brightening tide of witnesses. I wiped paint from my hands, the sticky residue a metaphor for the mess of it all, standing amid the wreckage, unbroken, yet profoundly shaken. The door burst open again, more officers spilling in, but the energy had flipped. The crowd's resolve, a force they couldn't ignore. Rage ebbed into weary determination, my eyes scanning the faces around me, gratitude mixing with the hurt. Miss Evelyn's stream hit 1,000 views, her voice steady. "This man's innocent. Spread the word." Carlos high-fived a nearby shopper, his enthusiasm infectious. Mr. Harper pulled me aside slightly, whispering, "I've got your back, Jamal. This ends today." Boone confronted the newcomers, spinning his tail, but cracks showed in his composure, gestures frantic. The backups distanced themselves subtly, allegiance wavering. Phones captured it all, a net closing around the injustice. Inside, the peak of turmoil crested, fear of death receding, replaced by a fierce clarity. This moment could redefine everything. Aaliyah's photo burned in memory, urging me forward. The bruise throbbed, dignity cracked, but mending in the collective gaze. New arrivals assessed the scene, one nodding to Mr. Harper. Chaos peaked, voices clashing like thunder. Boone's face twisted in frustration, the warning lingering like smoke. I drew a deep breath, neck protesting, the weight of survival settling in. Miss Evelyn patted my arm gently, her eyes kind. "You're brave, dear. We've got proof." Carlos's feed buzzed with alerts, the reach exponential. Mr. Harper flagged down an employee for cleanup, but his focus stayed on me. The additional officers conferred, radios alive. Boone interjected, voice rising, but authority slipped further. The crowd pressed in, demands for justice vocal. Emotional layers peeled back, rage to resolve, shame to strength, tears mingled with sweat, Aaliyah's smile a beacon. The knee's imprint lingered, a scar on my spirit. Sirens faded as more units arrived, but the power dynamic had inverted. Boone's threat hung, unresolved tension thick. I stood taller, the support buoying me, ready for whatever came next. Mr. Harper offered water, his hand steady. "Sit if you need, Jamal." But I remained upright, eyes on Boone, the confrontation far from finished. Chaos simmered, phones relentless. Miss Evelyn's live surged to thousands, comments a torrent of solidarity. Carlos grinned. "This is blowing up, man." Boone paced, isolated now, the backups conferring separately. The bruise pulsed, a rhythm of endurance. Inner peace flickered amid the storm. Aaliyah waiting, Lena's love. The door swung again, rain gusting in. Officers formed a loose circle, but the crowd's presence deterred aggression. Boone's warning echoed, a hollow echo. I rubbed my neck, wincing. The crack in dignity a chasm, yet bridged by unexpected allies. The paint dried sticky on my skin, a testament to the spill. Emotional peak lingered, tears unshed now, resolve hardening. If this was the breaking point, I'd emerge reforged. Miss Evelyn refreshed her stream, views climbing. "Keep watching, folks. This is real." Carlos pocketed his phone momentarily, offering a nod of respect. Mr. Harper retrieved a chair, insisting, "No arguments." But I waved it off, standing firm. Boone approached one last time, voice low. "You started this." But I knew better. The bias had. The scene teetered, climax unresolved, my breath ragged but free. The weight of eyes shifted from burden to shield, dignity reclaiming ground inch by inch. The scene teetered, climax unresolved, my breath ragged but free. The weight of eyes shifted from burden to shield, dignity reclaiming ground inch by inch. As the additional officers formed their wary circle, the air in Harper's thickened with a mix of rain-damp tension and the faint buzz of notifications pinging from dozens of phones. My breath came in uneven pulls, ragged from the ordeal but steadying now, the shield of onlookers transforming what could have been my breaking into a fragile stand. Mr. Harper didn't waste a second, his voice cutting sharp through the murmurs as he motioned to a backroom door. "Footage is rolling. High def, every corner. No one's touching it without a court order. He planted himself like a sentinel, arms folded, daring Boone or his reinforcements to push further. The new arrivals exchanged sidelong glances, their postures loosening as the reality of the crowd's digital arsenal sank in. Statements weren't just words anymore. They were live feeds etching truth into the ether. Miss Evelyn lowered her phone slightly, her feed still streaming, and stepped up to one of the backups with a notepad she'd pulled from her purse. I'm giving my statement right here. Saw the whole thing from the bulb aisle. No cause, just cruelty. Carlos followed suit, emailing his video clip to the officer's body cam email on the spot, his fingers flying across the screen. Other shoppers chimed in, a middle-aged guy in overalls dictating his account into a voice memo before sharing it aloud. Boone hovered on the fringe, his earlier bluster deflated, reduced to muttering into his radio about crowd control, while the scene documented itself without his permission. I wiped more paint from my face, the cool air from the open door brushing my skin, carrying a whisper of relief amid the lingering ache in my neck. By the time the officers herded Boone outside for a debrief, the store had emptied of its usual quiet rhythm, replaced by a hum of solidarity. Mr. Harper insisted I sit in his office, handing me a towel and a bottle of water, his eyes steady with unspoken apology. I've copied the tapes already, sent them to my lawyer friend. This town's ignored too much for too long. Witnesses lingered, swapping contact info, promising to back whatever came next. Miss Evelyn hugged me gently before leaving, her perfume a faint floral note against the chaos. We'll see this through, dear. You're not fighting alone. Carlos fist bumped me, his grin fierce. Clips at 500 views already. People are pissed. As the door jingled with their exits, I sat there, the bruise blooming purple under my collar, a quiet fire kindling in my chest. Not vengeance, but a resolve to turn this pain into purpose. That night, the viral spark ignited fully. Lena met me at the door, her eyes widening at the paint-streaked clothes and the welt on my neck. "Oh, Jamal," she whispered, pulling me into a hug that squeezed the breath I'd fought for earlier. Aaliyah rushed down the stairs, phone in hand, already scrolling through the clips popping up on local feeds. "Dad, this is you? What happened?" We sat at the kitchen table, the scent of leftover stew warming on the stove, as I recounted it all, the approach, the shove, the knee. Tears tracked down Lena's cheeks, her hand gripping mine like a lifeline. "You could have... I can't even think it." Aaliyah's face hardened, her usual spark dimmed by anger. "They can't get away with this." By morning, the clip had exploded. 10,000 views, shared across platforms, hashtags like #Willow Creek Injustice, trending in our corner of Georgia. Local news vans rolled into town, reporters knocking on doors for sound bites. The department moved fast under the glare. Boone on administrative leave within 48 hours. A bland press release about internal review, doing little to quell the outcry. Protests sprouted outside the station, not massive but persistent, signs waving in the crisp fall air. Accountability now. I filed the complaints that week. Criminal for assault under authority and false reporting. Civil against Boone and the city for rights violations. My lawyer, a sharp woman from Atlanta named Keisha Reynolds, reviewed the videos with a nod. Ironclad, witnesses, angles, his own words. We'll nail this. The DA's office, swamped with calls from activists and media, charged Boone swiftly, the weight of public eyes forcing their hand. Months blurred into a grind of depositions and doctor visits, the bruise fading, but the memory etched deep. Trial hit 8 months later, a courtroom packed with faces from that day. Miss Evelyn on the stand, her testimony unwavering. He was calm, compliant. The officer was the aggressor. Carlos's video played on loop, the jury's faces tightening at the knee press, the unnecessary force. Boone's defense crumbled, his plea for reduced sentence, a hollow echo of regret, without remorse. Convicted on both counts, he got 2.5 years after the deal, his badge stripped, certification yanked for good, no more patrolling anywhere. The city settled the civil suit quietly, $400,000 hitting my account like a bittersweet windfall. I donated half to a local youth center, funding workshops on knowing your rights, role-playing de-escalation with actors posing as cops. Teach 'em young, I told the director, thinking of Aaliyah's wide eyes that night. Transformation crept in slow, like dawn after a long watch. I stopped burying my service stories, started sharing at community centers, the wooden floors creaking under chairs as folks leaned in. I scouted in recon, spotted dangers overseas, but home? That's where the real ambushes hide. Churches invited me too, pulpits echoing my words on resilience amid bias. Aaliyah soaked it up, her college apps shifting, law school now, her essay raw, to fix the system that almost stole my dad. Lena and I drew tighter, evenings on the porch with her head on my shoulder, her voice soft. You've shouldered this alone for years. Let us help carry it. Our bond deepened, conversations turning to healing, not just surviving. It wasn't a clean win, though. No storybook ending where everything sparkles. Some days, stepping into stores, my shoulders tense up automatic, scanning for threats and reflections. Whispers still follow in Willow Creek, old prejudices dying hard. But change flickered. Ms. Evelyn waves from her porch when I drive by, her garden blooming brighter each spring. The town council pushed for body cams, training sessions on bias, small steps, but real. Boone vanished after release, his name a cautionary tale in department memos, Google searches forever tainted. Looking back, America demanded my sweat and blood abroad, only to brand me foe on familiar streets. Yet those strangers that rainy day, their voices, their cameras, reignited faith in the fight. They showed me we're worth the battle, that silence isn't inevitable. If you've ever felt erased or hunted, remember, you're seen, you're heard. Drop your story in the comments. Let's build that bridge together. And if this resonates, subscribe. These truths need voices to keep them alive. I still swing by Harper's for tools. The bells jingle, a familiar tune. Mr. Harper nods with a knowing smile. No charge for that drill bit I never paid for. Each time I step out, bag in hand, the air feels lighter, breaths deeper. Ordinary souls chose action over apathy, and that's the quiet victory that lingers. The check sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I even touched it. $400,000. To some, that's the lottery. To me, it felt like blood money, a payout for a piece of my soul that Travis Boone had tried to grind into the linoleum at Harper's. Every time the sun hit that slip of paper, the zeros seemed to shimmer like the wet paint that had ruined my clothes that day. Lena would walk past it, her hand grazing my shoulder, her silence asking the question I wasn't ready to answer. Does this make it even? It didn't. You can't put a price on the moment the air leaves your lungs and you realize your daughter might grow up knowing you as a headline instead of a father. But I knew I couldn't just let that money sit there mocking me. I'm a Marine. We don't leave assets in the field to rot. We use them to fortify the position. I remember sitting on the porch, watching the Georgia dusk swallow the yard, the fireflies beginning their nightly patrol. I thought about Fallujah, the medals they pinned on my chest for scouting dangers in a desert half a world away. Back then, the danger was clear. It wore a different uniform, spoke a different tongue. But in Willow Creek, the danger was the guy you waved to at the diner. It was the quiet folks who watched the knee go down and said nothing until a grandmother and a kid with a cell phone shamed them into humanity. I'm staying, Lena, I said one night, the wood of the porch creaking under my boots. She didn't look up from her book, but I saw her shoulders drop, the tension of the last year finally starting to leak out. I thought about taking this money and buying us a house near the coast, somewhere where no one knows my name or my face. But if I leave, Boone wins. If I leave, the next kid who walks into Harper's is standing there alone. That's how the Carter Center started. I bought an old abandoned warehouse on the edge of the black neighborhood, a place that used to smell like stagnant water and forgotten dreams. I spent 6 months swinging a hammer myself, my old shoulder injury barking at me every time I lifted a sheet of drywall. I didn't mind the pain. It felt honest. It felt like I was building a bunker for the next generation. I didn't want a place for basketball and video games, though we had those too. I wanted a place for the protocol. That's what the kids started calling my workshops. I'd stand at the front of a room full of young black and brown boys, their eyes wide and skeptical, and I'd teach them situational awareness. I'd teach them how to breathe when the sirens start. I didn't teach them to be submissive. I taught them to be tactical. Survival is a win, I'd tell them, my voice echoing off the rafters. Dignity is something you keep inside. They can touch your body. They can even put you in the dirt, but they can't take your worth unless you hand it to them. You see a threat, you assess, you record, you outlast. One afternoon, a kid named Marcus, maybe 14, reminded me of myself back in the day, asked a question that stopped my heart. Mr. Jamal, why did you fight for a country that treats you like that? The room went tomb silent. I looked at my hands, calloused and stained with the work of rebuilding. I thought about the DD-214 in my wallet and the purple bruise that had finally faded from my neck. I didn't fight for the men who hate me, Marcus, I said, leaning over the podium. I fought for the woman who stood up with a cell phone. I fought for the manager who risked his business to save my life. I fought for the idea of what we can be when we stop being afraid of the truth. This country is a fixer-upper, just like that house I bought. The bones are good, but the rot is deep. 3 years crawled by, and Willow Creek started to look different through the windshield of my truck. The town council finally passed the body cam mandate, and for the first time in my life, I saw a black woman sitting on the police oversight board. It wasn't a revolution. It was a slow, grinding shift, like a glacier carving out a new valley. Aaliyah was 20 now, a junior at Spelman, her mind a razor wire trap for legal precedent. She'd come home for the summer, her room overflowing with thick casebooks on constitutional law. She wasn't that girl who snuck extra cornbread anymore. She was a woman who looked at the world and saw a series of arguments she intended to win. One Saturday morning, we were sitting on the porch, the air heavy with the scent of jasmine and the coming rain. She was reading a deposition for a pro bono case she was assisting with, a kid in Atlanta who'd been harassed in a park. "Dad," she said, not looking up from her highlighter, "I found the old news clips of your trial last night. I watched the one where Mr. Harper was yelling at the judge. I don't think I ever thanked him properly." "He knows, baby girl," I said, leaning back. "He sees you going to law school. That's all the thanks a man like him needs." "I used to be scared for you," she whispered, the highlighter clicking shut. "Every time you went to the store, I'd hold my breath until I heard the truck pull into the gravel. But now, I'm just ready. I don't want to just survive the system anymore. I want to be the one who writes the rules." I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt the weight truly lift. The knee on my neck hadn't just been a trauma, it had been a catalyst. I'd traded my peace for her power, and looking at the fire in her eyes, I knew it was the best deal I'd ever made. But the past has a way of showing its face when you least expect it. A week later, I was driving back from a job site 2 counties over. I was low on gas, pulling into a dusty, no-name station off the interstate. The sun was a dying ember on the horizon, casting long, distorted shadows across the pavement. I stepped out of the truck, The familiar click of the gas pump, a rhythm I knew by heart. That's when I saw him. He was standing by an old rusted sedan, fumbling with a credit card at the pump across from mine. He wasn't in uniform. He was wearing a faded flannel shirt and a baseball cap pulled low, his shoulders hunched like he was trying to hide from the very air around him. He looked smaller, older. The beet-red fury I remembered had been replaced by a gray, hollow exhaustion. Travis Boone. My heart didn't race. My palms didn't sweat. My recon training kicked in. Not the part that looks for a target, but the part that assesses a broken enemy. He looked up, and for a split second, our eyes locked. I saw the flash of recognition hit him like a physical blow. He froze, his hand trembling on the gas nozzle. In that silence, the ghost of the hardware store stood between us. I could almost feel the cold linoleum under my back. I could almost hear the sirens. Boone looked away first. He fumbled with his car door, his movements frantic, desperate to get away. He didn't say a word. He didn't offer a half-hearted apology or a defiant glare. He just looked ashamed. He was a man whose legacy was a viral video of his own cruelty, a man who would forever be defined by his worst 10 minutes on Earth. I stood my ground. I didn't yell. I didn't move toward him. I just finished pumping my gas, my movements slow and deliberate. As he peeled out of the lot, his tires spitting gravel, I realized something that all the therapy and church sermons hadn't been able to teach me. Forgiveness isn't a handshake. It isn't even an emotion. It's the moment you realize the person who hurt you no longer has the power to make you feel like a victim. I watched his taillights vanish into the dusk, and I didn't feel rage. I felt a strange, cold pity. He was still trapped in that aisle at Harper's, fueled by a hate that had nowhere left to go. I was the one who had walked out of the store. I climbed back into my truck, adjusted my mirrors, and started the engine. I had a dinner waiting for me at home. I had a daughter who was going to change the world. And for the first time since that rainy Thursday, I didn't check the rearview mirror to see who was following me. I was just a man driving home. The following Sunday, Willow Creek held its annual Founders Day Festival. Usually it was just an excuse for the town to shut down Main Street and sell overpriced funnel cakes, but this year felt different. There was a small ceremony at the town square, right near the old courthouse. They weren't unveiling a statue or anything grand, just a small plaque dedicated to the witnesses of Willow Creek. I stood in the back of the crowd, leaning against a brick wall, my hands tucked into the pockets of my work jacket. I saw Miss Evelyn there, looking sharp in a bright yellow dress, waving to people like she'd been elected mayor. I saw Carlos, who had opened his own mobile repair business with the money he'd made from the media appearances after the trial. He spotted me and gave a sharp nod, a silent code between two men who had stood in the fire together. Mr. Harper was on the small stage, squinting through his glasses as he read a short speech. He didn't talk about politics or systemic issues. He talked about the neighbor's duty. He talked about how a town is only as strong as the people willing to speak up when the light gets dim. When the applause finished, it wasn't thunderous, but it was steady. It was the sound of a community trying to convince itself it could be better. After the ceremony, I walked down to the hardware store. It was closed for the holiday, but I had a key. Mr. Harper had given me one a year back so I could pick up supplies for the youth center on weekends. I pushed open the door, and the bell jingled. That same high-pitched silver sound. The store was empty, the air still smelling of cedar and metal. I walked past the registers, past the plumbing section, and stopped right there in aisle 7. The floor had been redone. The blue and white paint stains were gone, replaced by polished gray concrete. I stood exactly where Boone had put his knee. I closed my eyes and listened. I didn't hear the sirens anymore. I didn't hear the "I can't breathe" echoing in my throat. Instead, I heard the faint sound of Aaliyah's voice from that morning, arguing a point of law over breakfast. I heard the laughter of the boys at the center, learning how to build something with their own two hands. I realized then that the dream they talk about, the American one, isn't something you're given. It's something you have to defend, sometimes from the very people sworn to protect it. It's a messy, exhausting, multi-generational construction project. And I was just one more worker on the site. I walked out of the store, locking the door behind me. The rain started to fall, a soft, warm Georgia drizzle that washed the dust off the sidewalk. I didn't rush to my truck. I just stood there for a second, letting the water hit my face. Looking back, I know some folks will say I got lucky. Lucky that there were cameras. Lucky that I was a veteran. But luck didn't build that youth center. Luck didn't get Aaliyah into law school. Resilience did. The same resilience that kept me alive in the desert kept me whole in Willow Creek. I climbed into the cab of my truck and turned over the engine. I had a few more boards to sand down at the center before Lena expected me home for dinner. As I pulled out onto the main road, I saw a police cruiser idling at the stoplight. The officer inside, a young guy, maybe 25, looked over at me. He didn't stare. He didn't reach for anything. He just gave a small, respectful nod and waited for the light to turn green. I nodded back. It wasn't a total peace treaty, but it was a start. "I'm still here," I whispered to the empty cab, a small smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. "And I ain't going nowhere." I hit the gas, the tires humming against the wet asphalt, heading toward the house I'd built, in the town I'd finally made my own. The story wasn't over. It never really is. But for today, the air was clear, and I could breathe just fine.